Shall I put it down?
Yeah, go on. Oh, have I got something in there? Oh, yeah, a couple of cards. There we go. Thank you very much. Two minutes, did I make it? 2 minutes to go, I make it?
Have you not got like a list of people that... No.
No.
I mean, obviously people requested certain, certain workshops or certain...
Well, presumably. I think they had to pre-book, didn't you? Or did you? Yeah. It's very popular at the PA show. In when was the PA show? March, was it? February, March? Olympia. Yes, that's the one at Olympia. Fully booked for that one. And Manchester PA show as well.
This is the only one I booked. So.
It better be good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. There's a what was I watching? Somebody said there's an equity rule for performing, and if there's more people on stage than in the audience, you can cancel. So we're going ahead.
You can't win this one.
We'll start in about 30 seconds then. If anyone else is coming, they're coming. If they're not, they're not. Now. Unless you desperately need the toilet, in which case I'll wait. Okay, we'll start. I think you just never know, sometimes people are going to turn up. So, welcome to the last afternoon speaking session. My name's Andrew Jardine. I'm the General Manager of the Institute of Administrative Management, which from this point on will be the IAM because it's quite a mouthful. My background was admin. I originally started in administration in the civil service. I actually started work for the Inland Revenue. Because somebody has to. And then moved to the Ministry of Defence, and then I became a manager in the Ministry of Defence, and then I became a trainer for 20 years and a consultant, and now I'm the General Manager. So that's just a little bit about me. I don't want to dwell too much on the IAM. I mean, I do, because I want to get members, but that's not the why you're here. So just briefly, I'll do the welcome now. Then we'll talk about what conflict is, how we react to it, and then during the course of the presentation there'll be some hints and tips and tools and techniques that can help you with managing conflict. So the IAM's purpose is to champion professionals in the fields of administration and management, and we provide services and benefits to support our members' professional and career development. Obviously this is a Miss Jones event, so I'm not here to oversell, but if anyone's interested, I do have a flyer about what we do and the benefits we have. Briefly, our benefits in 4 areas. You get recognition, so you get letters after your name because it's a professional body, a registered professional body. We have community events, we have forums, social media, that kind of thing. We provide information through newsletters, articles, academic journals. But the main thing that I focus on is, or what I've repositioned the organisation to focus on, is professional development. So we have qualifications, we have 2 PA and EA specific qualifications. We do our own CPD events. So I'm actually here today, I'm doing this, and then I'm doing my own event this evening with, and our guest speaker is Lucy Brazier. I don't know if anyone's heard of Lucy, a couple of people nodding. We do webinars and we do endorsed training. So, yeah. No problem. So with the endorsed training, you get discounts off of training providers. So people, I don't know if you've heard of Paul Pennant, Adam Fiddler, Lucy Brazier, Heather Baker, all those people are endorsed by us, and as an IA member you get a discount. So that's it, that's the IAM bit out of the way. Right, this particular session's normally about 60 minutes long, about an hour, so I'm going to have to shorten bits, or if you're happy to stay a bit longer, we'll do the full hour, but I appreciate people might have things they need to get to, and the session is going to focus, unsurprisingly, on conflict management. That's interesting. Under there it says emotional tension, but none of the animation is working. See, you should always test these things. Anyway, what's conflict? Conflict has a number of definitions that are up there. The important thing for me is it's somewhere between opposition and battle. Hopefully not many of yours fall into the battle end of the scale. As far as I'm concerned, conflict is a type of negotiation, but the thing that's different when there's conflict involved is that bit that's highlighted, and it would have come up really nicely on things like that. Because what's different with conflict is usually there's some kind of heightened emotion, some kind of emotional tension, whether it's upset, tearful, angry, frustrated, and something else is involved, rather than just having a normal conversation or negotiation or problem-solving session. Most people dread conflict, and I'm including in conflict confrontation, because most people dread confrontation as well, and part of that is the fear that it will lead to conflict, and it's usually for these reasons that are up there. So you might, if you're a particularly nice person, you're probably over here where you don't want to hurt someone else's feelings, but more often than not we don't like conflict because we don't have our feelings hurt, or we don't want to feel cheated or put upon or in any way. That's quite right. So conflict generally for most people, and I've done this quite a few times, and no one's ever said, yeah, I really love conflict. Do come in. I think some people handle conflicts better, but I don't know many people who actually enjoy it. There is a group of people who do, and we'll just come on to them during the course of the presentation. What's a shame is when that reveals separately, it's really cute. So we'll just pretend it revealed quick and we'll all go, oh. So there are 3 responses to conflict indicated by those pictures. Most people know 2 of them, and they start with F. What are the normal responses to? Fight and flight. So you either want to fight back, want to defend yourself, or go on the attack, or you run away. Does anyone know what the third one is? Because there's actually 3, but we don't often mention the third one. Freeze. You're kind of in the right ballpark. So the 3 kind of survival responses to threat: stand up and fight, run away, or freeze. If you've got nowhere to run to and you're not a fighter normally, you can freeze. So that's what how we normally respond to conflict, which is part of the reason why we don't like it, obviously, unless you enjoy a good fight. Now, what happens in the brain is this. This is the way the brain is structured. There's a little part of the brain, in fact there's 2 parts, and if you can imagine, the brain is like that, with the eyes are here, and behind each eye in a direct line is a thing called the amygdala. And the amygdala is very old from an evolutionary point of view. It's been in our brains for a very, very long time, and in every animal's brain. And it's very, very highly attuned to fight, flight or freeze. It's designed to protect us. So the amygdala is the part of the brain that if you're at home and you've finally got rid of the rest of the family, that magical half hour, whatever it is. So your partner's gone out. If you've got children, they're at some sporting event or whatever, and you finally get an hour to yourself and you find a quiet space and you read or catch up on a hobby or something like that, and you've maybe got a glass of wine on the go. If in a part of the house that's meant to be quiet you hear a noise, the amygdala is the part of your brain that goes burglar, attacker, ghost, alien, all kinds of unlikely but stressful and potentially threatening scenarios. And then the rational part of your brain goes, well, probably unlikely that. I'll go and see what it is, or, they're back early or whatever it is. So that part of the brain is called the amygdala, and it plays a huge part in why conflict is stressful to us. Again, that should build up, but there's a few like that. Right, there's a thing called the amygdala hijack. Now, it's not a real thing. The amygdala doesn't take over your brain, but that's the name, the kind of nickname given to it, because essentially what the amygdala does do is that it changes the way our brain is interpreting an event and reacting in an event. So there are physical side effects to this, which are on the left, on the left here. And I'm sure you can't read all of them because they're quite small, but they're along the lines of your mouth goes dry, your heart rate increases, you might get sweaty palms or that kind of thing. And the reason it's happening is because the amygdala has flooded the brain with stress hormones, so cortisol and adrenaline principally. And the reason it's doing that is because it's responding to a perceived threat. And that's how a lot of us feel when we're in a conflict situation. Now that would be bad enough, and there's a heat flush to the face, so that's blushing and looking embarrassed, which is embarrassing in itself. But that's only half the story, because the other thing that the amygdala does is it shuts down a bit strong. It kind of inhibits some of the neural pathways to our prefrontal cortex. And the prefrontal cortex part of the brain is where the deep thinking happens. That's the bit that we've got more development in than any other animal on the planet. It's the higher function stuff. It's high level problem solving, high level language skills and social skills, all of that kind of stuff. And that's the real problem. This is inconvenient. That can really get in the way. So all of these things happen. We might become disorientated. Our complex decision making disappears. We want things to be simple. I'm going to run away. I'm going to punch this person or whatever it is. We want things to be simple. We also struggle to see multiple perspectives. So we kind of, all we can focus on is the bit that we think's right. And obviously, if the other person's also going through the same, all they can focus on is what they think is right as well. And it obviously makes the conflict escalate and get worse. My wife, I was talking to my wife about doing this presentation, and she had a good example of this, where she got angry with our son. Now, he's a teenager, so it's his fault, because that's what teenagers are like. But the reality was, she wanted him to help in the garden. So, teenager and helping are not good in a sentence at the best of times. So he went out reluctantly to help, and there was a couple of jobs that needed doing. One of them involved using secateurs and cutting things, and he's a 14-year-old boy, and the other one involved tidying up. So my wife wanted him to tidy up, and obviously being a 14-year-old boy, he wanted to do cutty things. And so, that's right. And so I was watching them because it was amusing, rather than actually helping. And they were sort of arguing about this, and she just decided in her head, because he was being awkward, he wasn't necessarily, but because she'd already got to the state where she was expecting him to be awkward, and then he wasn't doing the one job asked of him, she sort of dug her heels in. Said, "You're doing the tidying up." "Well, what can I do?" "You're doing..." And then they sort of argued about it a bit and started doing it. And then she came in for a drink and said, before you say anything, I know the idea is get him involved, and I could have given him that, but I was just annoyed with him. And that's what happens when you're in conflict. Even if some part of your brain is going, actually what they're saying is quite sensible, sometimes it just becomes an ego response, and we just dig in our heels. And obviously if they're digging in their heels, we don't get very far. Our attention narrows as well. There's a reason for that, and I'm going to come on to it in a little while. But that last one is also important. And our memory, under the stress of conflict and confrontation, becomes untrustworthy, unreliable. The police are not keen on witness statements unless there are hundreds of them that all say the same thing. Because under stress, most of us have unreliable memories. you probably have seen this. If you've been in an argument with somebody, and then you sort of, once everyone's calmed down and you're talking about it, their recollection of the argument can be completely different to yours. Because the brain was focusing on certain bits and not the whole picture. And that's what happens under this pressure of an amygdala hijack. You'll also have seen people on TV shows, game shows, where you know they know the answer, and they know the answer, but they just can't get it to the front of their brain and say it. So, under conflict, all of this physiological stuff happens, and this psychological stuff happens as well, which gets in the way. Right, what else happens? See, they come up one at a time. It's all about stimulus and response. Does anyone know, or who knows here, who or what Pavlov and his dogs were? A couple of nods. What was it, briefly? What did he do? Why is it important?
Yeah. Ring a bell every time the dog eats, and then every time you ring a bell, the dog salivates, even though he's not getting food.
Exactly. So, useful contribution to society, more dog saliva. It was to do with conditioned responses. So, as he fed the dogs, or prior to feeding the dogs, he would ring a bell, and then the dogs would see the food, eat the food, smell the food, get excited, to the point where all he needed to do was ring the bell, and the dogs expected food so much they started to salivate. So it's all about our response to a specific stimulus. So these were going to come up one at a time. So any particular response to the stimulus of Boris? Yeah. Do you know what? I actually did this presentation first earlier in the year, and Boris was kind of, now I get much better responses to Boris. Donald Trump, my guess is, most people in this room have a different response to George Clooney than my response necessarily would be. And then this fella pops up, and everyone's very, very happy to see him. So, on a very minor scale, we have responses to stimuli all the time, and some responses will be stronger than others. Right. Oh, I was back to the next slide, but again, it's going to just show the whole thing in one go. So before I put up the next slide should generate a response. It's a specific stimulus designed for a specific audience where there are more women in the audience than men. It's not to say men wouldn't necessarily respond, but typically the female response is greater than the male response to this one. So, what I'm about to put up is a headline from the Daily Mail. So we're already on shaky ground. From 2015. You've got to bear that in mind when you see what the headline was. Not from 2051, not from 1951, but from 2015. So obviously the reason for this slide is just to say that obviously certain stimuli generate stronger responses. Now, you can look this up, it's on their website. Oh, if anyone does want copies of the slides, just email me or get my email address off of Lisa or somebody from Miss Jones, and I'll send you the slides. So there's this article. I mean, it's wrong on so many levels. It's hard to know where to start. But obviously, it generates a response. Okay, part of good conflict management is recognizing and not so much controlling, but being aware of and managing how we respond to certain stimuli. Right. This model here is the first kind of tool technique to help manage with this emotional response under conflict. It comes from a book called 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Has anyone heard of or read? You've heard of? Have you read it? Bits of it? You nodded as well, you've heard of? Not read? Right, okay. If you can forgive the slightly corny, cheesy title, I would thoroughly recommend it. It's kind of showing its age now, because there's nothing in there about technology or things like that, which to some extent is fine. It was never intended to be. But I would still thoroughly recommend it. There's stuff in there about prioritizing and about communication skills. But what the bit that I want to talk about is that Covey talks about stimulus and response. And he says between stimulus and response is our opportunity to choose how we respond. And he calls these unique human endowments. And I disagree with him on that. I think animals can do some of this as well. It's just that we're better than any other animal, in theory, at this. So what he's suggesting is, not linked specifically in the book to conflict, but to any response, whether it's speaking up at meetings, doing a presentation, whatever it is. His model suggests that there are 4 areas that we can work on that will help us so that our response is not just a Pavlovian conditioned response to a stimulus. So we take control of our responses. And obviously there's a lot of that in conflict management. So the first one, this one here, is about self-awareness. Now, self-awareness is probably the buzzword subject for anything in leadership, motivation, conflict management, emotional intelligence. You know, it's a very topical subject at the moment. But self-awareness is the ability to know ourselves, and specifically with conflict management, it's knowing what behaviour in other people is likely to make us just have a conditioned response instead of being in control of what we do. It's about knowing our own hot buttons. What's going to really make us, react first rather than think? Now, my father was Scottish, and I don't know if people in England, we tend to be able to recognise 2 Scottish accents. Mine's slightly better because half my family is Scottish, but by and large, we categorise Scottish accents as Edinburgh accents, which are lovely and lilting and musical, and Glasgow accents. Now, my guess is not everyone in this room is going to know a comedy character from a while ago called Rabsy Nesbitt, but a couple of people will. Now, Rabsy Nesbitt, with a little bit more intellect on top, was sort of where my father grew up. So Rabsy Nesbitt had a very harsh Glaswegian accent. So whenever in films, movies, sitcoms, whatever, they want to have a threatening Scotsman, they use a Glaswegian accent. So my dad had that. He was short-tempered. His whole kind of life up to the point of getting married was in male-dominated environments. So his language was colourful. So even to this day, harsh Glaswegian accents immediately give me an emotional response based on, growing up in childhood and things like that. So self-awareness is just knowing, actually, it's just recognising I'm already having an emotional response here and nothing's happened, and then we can do something about it, which is the next 3. I don't know if you can see the picture, but there's a kitten and the reflection he sees is of a lion. So this is about imagination. Now, animals can solve problems. There's some very good problem-solving birds in the world. But this is about coming up with different options in any situation. If you can hand on heart say, when you've responded emotionally to somebody, that every single person in the world would have responded the same way, then you're not responsible for your reaction. My guess is there is no situation where that's happened because whenever we're in a situation where there's likely to be conflict, we've always got at least 3 options: fight, flight and freeze. So some people will immediately get ready to defend themselves and have a go back. Others will be ready to give in straight away because that's the easiest option, and others will just want to avoid the situation completely. But we have the imagination. I'm going into this is what's going to happen. Last time he did this or she did that, so this is how I'm going to respond this way, this time. We also have a decision-making facility. Now, in the book, Covey talks about right and wrong. Now, the reason for that is that his background, he's a lay minister and things like that, so he has a very clear idea of what right and wrong is. I think it's a bit greyer than that, my personal view is, but what he's right on is we have a set of internal criteria that determine how we decide how we're going to act. And obviously, if we just react, it's just going to be the same each time. So we need to be self-aware, right? I'm starting to react, starting to get emotional. I could look at it in any number of different ways. I could do this, this, and this. And then this is about having an idea in your head of how you want to be perceived or how you want the encounter to go or what you want to get out of it. Now, these are all just intellectual fancies unless we do something about them. And the last human endowment is independent will. So the willpower to do something about it, which is why I've used health as an option, as the indicator for independent will. Because I have the self-awareness to know that when I was 20, I wasn't this shape. And I have lots of imagination. I can change my diet this way and I can do more exercise that way. I could, not watch the football on the telly and go out somewhere. And I know what I should do, but if I do nothing about it, it's irrelevant. Up to there, we're just having fun with the thinking. And so what Covey talks about is using these 4 headings so that when we go into a situation, we think, right, I know myself and I know this person, I know how they push my buttons, I can imagine different outcomes, I want it to look like this, I want to behave like that, and I'm going to actually do it this time. I had a good example of this with a guy, and he was a senior manager. He was a senior manager in a local authority. And what he started doing was, when he went into meetings, at the top of his notepad, he would write S2T Q2L. Just wrote 2, shorthand things at the top of his pad. And what they stood for were slow to talk, quick to listen. Because he was the type of character that in a meeting he would dominate it. Unless there was someone else like him, in which case they'd dominate it together and just talk to each other, essentially. And I'm sure you've worked with people who are like that. And he recognised that dominating the meetings meant he wasn't getting the best out of his team, he wasn't learning what was happening because people didn't want to talk to him in a meeting because he would just start getting louder and louder. And so he wrote it down. And I saw him 6 months after doing a training course with him. And he was saying, it's not perfect because sometimes someone will say something stupid and I've got to correct them. Have you? Have you really? But more often than not, if he was about to say something and he saw those 2 3-letter acronyms, he would pause and let somebody else go first. So that's really how kind of pragmatic this can be. Right. I've got a puzzle for you now. Part of conflict management is about being observant. So I'm going to set you a test. You're going to see 4 slides like this. At the end of the 4th, after the 4th slide, I'm going to ask you how many pictures did you see? So you have a figure. Now, because trainers are tricky, I don't mean this is one big picture. These are 20 small pictures. So 4 by 5, 20 small pictures. To make it slightly more challenging for your tests of observation, don't count any pictures with a river in. So can everyone see that that picture's got a river running through a city? So on this particular page, only 19 pictures count. Does everyone understand? Okay. Now, I'm also not going to be tricky at the end and say, did you count that picture? It's only going to be to the right of this line and below the heading, the title, okay? So 4 slides will pop up. They won't all be quite as nicely laid out as this. Some of them will have pictures at different angles and stuff like that. Are you ready for your test? So 4 slides. If there's any doubt, if something's not a picture, it will be labelled as not a picture. No, this is one of the slides, so we're starting here. Except the river. So everyone should be up to 19. Yeah? After slide 1, you start at 19. So you're going to add the other 3 slides, however many pictures you see as we go through. I'm not going to give you a huge amount of time, because obviously it's an observation test and a test of your brain working. But if everyone's ready, so that's not a picture. Is everyone happy that that's not a picture? So as I said, the picture's now not uniform sizes. It's a bit trickier than the first slide. So 3rd slide is that one again. That's not a picture. Everything else on there counts. So you'll be up to a total of, 35, 45, 46, 38. I don't know if that's helping at all. And then the final slide is that one. Let me help you here. There's 2 slides with water. That's the seaside. It's fine. You can include that one. That's a river. Don't include that one. So you should have a number. If your number is less than, let's say, 46, you're way out. If your number's over 60, you're way out as well. No, that doesn't work on here either. Excellent. Right. So, how many did you get? 51? Oh. 52? 50? 52? Lost count. Fair enough. Right. Did anyone else get 51? 2 people. You're both correct. How many slides? How many slides did you need to get to 51? How many slides did you look at before you got to 51? Oh, 4, okay.
Yeah, 4.
You don't seem convinced. Oh, okay. That might seem a strange question. The reason I asked it is because slide 3 said that at the top. And slide 2 said that at the top. On the subject of conflict, I've had people say, oh, you've swapped the slides over. Right, there's my slides. They're only in there once. Oh, we'll go back to view now. Is it that one? Yeah, there we go. Right, so there was a trick. The reason we do this is, if you remember, let's go back a few. Oh, our attention narrows once we're under pressure. I'm guessing that's not the most pressured test you're going to have even today, let alone for the week. However, there was an element of concentration required, and somebody at the front had said, only look there and don't look above, so you focus in. But that's what happens when we're in conflict, is our concentration and our focus narrows down to whatever's in front of us, which means we stop taking in external influences. It means we stop widening the view. And it's a thing called the reticular activating system, get me, which is another small cluster of cells in the brain. And it's designed to filter information. Now, depending on whose research you read, is anything from 2 to 6 billion bits of information enters through our senses in any 1 second. So even sat here, we've got the different colours in the room. There's listening to my voice and deciding whether you like it or not. There's the comfort of the chair. There's stuff going on outside. So all of that's going on. So we need the reticular activating system. The problem with it is twofold, though. One is it focuses us in, which isn't very good when it's on conflict. And because of that, we then ignore other influences. Right. Who caught the tube to work this morning? Or to come here? Great, okay. How many people did you pass who were wearing something red? You haven't got a clue. You won't have a clue because you weren't looking for it, in the same way as you weren't looking for the bit at the top there. The reticular activating system, though, the good news with it is it's programmable. Now, in most cases, we program it a bit because we know what we're looking for. But in other cases, it's subconscious. So if you've got any baby events happening in the family, whether you're going to become a grandparent or a parent, or you've got or you've just had a, well, not that you've had the grandchild, but you've had a grandchild added to the family, or you've had a child, or you've got a sister, or somebody close, you start hearing baby conversations more. It's not that the world's talking more about babies, it's just that the reticular activating system has gone, oh, this is important to you. There's a conversation over there. It's the same with buying a car or buying a house and all that kind of stuff. So it's really important, the reticular activating system. The good news with it is that we can program it. We can make it view things differently. And obviously for this session, where this is going, is to try and focus it on understanding stimuli so that we can change uncontrolled responses into controlled responses. Uncontrolled responses, when we're in conflict, are the things that lead to this. It gets emotional. It focuses on personalities and on negative emotions. Tension tends to increase and the conflict escalates. Or, if you're not the kind of conflict escalating type of person, you just give in because it's just hard work and it's emotionally draining or whatever. So we can use the reticular activating system to decide we're going to view conflict differently and we're going to aim for controlled responses. Then it focuses on problem solving. It's about decreasing the tension and maintaining relationship. And in theory, and in most cases, the conflict will de-escalate. Part of the challenge is seeing conflict differently. Part of the challenge is making sure that we see conflict not necessarily as a bad thing, but just as a thing. And then it's about how we use that. So, I'm going to give you 2 versions of how to view conflict differently. So this is the textbook version. This is the grown-up stuff. The second one will be the playground rules, which people seem to find more intuitive. So, as far as the textbooks go, conflict is a good thing. It's a good thing because it opens up issues, as you'd imagine it would. Because once people are emotional and angry or passionate or whatever, they tend to speak without thinking sometimes. So it helps to open up issues, which in a work or team environment is usually a useful thing. It results in innovation as well. It results in solving a problem if the two people can stay positive and view it as an opportunity to do so. And some of the greatest innovations in the world have come from the worst conflicts in the world, which have been genuine conflicts at the highest level. We're also in a socially diverse country, and our society encourages that largely, exception of Boris Johnson. So we're in a culturally diverse society, and natural outcome of being more diverse is you're going to get more differences of opinion. And so that's just the way it works. It's just, it's just part of, there's nothing kind of wrong with conflict, it's just it's just likely to happen. It also fosters understanding as part of the opening up issues. Once somebody has finally opened up about something, it gives you a chance to understand them better, which sort of leads us to is part of a healthy relationship. You should have conflict in a relationship. My guess is you've had more conflict with your partner or your sister, brother, mother, father, children than anyone else in your life. And it's part of a healthy relationship. All what matters is how the conflict is handled, not that there isn't any. Relationship counsellors, if you've ever been to any, or you know someone who is one, or you are one, or you've seen it on the sitcoms and whatever, the reality is the worst thing that they hear is, oh no, we never fight. Because either the couple are lying or somebody, if not both people in that relationship, are building up huge stores of resentment. Because if you're not fighting, it's going somewhere. So it's natural to fight. It shouldn't be seen as a terrible thing. It's just how it works, in terms of using positive language instead of negative language and stuff like that. And it does actually build cohesiveness. If you've been through a tough conversation with somebody and come out the other side, it can very often make the relationship stronger, not weaker. Right. It's really annoying that the next two slides come up at the same time. Because they are meant to illustrate two different points, but never mind. Yeah. Bear with me. I'm just going to move Piers, if I could. No, I can't move it because it's not. Okay. Under Piers is a Lego picture, and it's a group of stormtroopers picking on one person. Oh, let me put it back to. So this is the playground version of conflict. There are 4 options in any conflict. So if you can ignore him for a second, behind that is a group of people surrounding one person. So the first option in conflict is that the person you're in conflict with personally wants you as a person, to feel bad. So they are deliberately being mean. In which case, there's one way that you can spoil their day, and that's not reacting to what they're trying to do to push your buttons. The actual thing you're in conflict over, you may or may not be able to do anything about. But as a minimum, we can decide to ourselves, right, well, they may get the thing that they want, but I'm not going to let them ruin my day as well. So that's part of the reaction to the first one, which is about the individual who personally wants you to feel bad. Now, Piers represents a second group of people. Who Piers Morgan represents is a group of people who just want to antagonise everybody. If you've ever seen him on what do you do, ITV breakfast show, it's part of his job to antagonise people to get reactions out of them. Now, your response again is similar to the first one. If that's how they enjoy conversation, then don't give them the satisfaction. But it's worse here, because this group of people are used to negotiating when everybody's upset, because that's how they've started it. So they're in control as soon as we get upset with them. So part of what they want is to get you off balance. Okay? So there's a couple of things we can say to ourselves to help here. Now, start with this one. By all means, actually say it. If you've got the confidence, and if you've had enough of somebody, then by all means actually say the words out loud. But either way, you can say it to yourself. I like this one. I really like this one. Are you really going to let the opinion of one person, in particular if they're deliberately trying to wind you up, spoil your day, stop your good energy? So that's a really useful one to remind ourselves when we find ourselves in a situation. And we've decided it's definitely them. They definitely want me to feel bad in this negotiation, this conversation, or whatever it is. Right. The next two pictures, again, should come up one at a time. So under there is me, just about. What I represent is the third group. Let me just ask you a question first. Has anybody here ever said something that was misinterpreted? I'm guessing that's everybody. So you either hadn't really thought through what you were saying, or you hadn't kind of identified there could be a second understanding of it or whatever, and you just say it and it comes out. So the point here is, if that seems genuinely the case, the attitude we should be fostering is one of forgiveness and giving someone a second chance. And I would say that because I'm really good at it. Women's World Cup this summer, yeah? Now, before we go any further, I was watching the previous Women's World Cup. I'm not new to the bandwagon. I've been there for a while. But I'm guessing some people here would have watched some of the Women's World Cup. I was watching it with my wife, which was amusing in the first place because she hates football, but she's quite a strong feminist. And so she was sat there with her, hate football, but it's women playing and I should support it, kind of thing, which I found quite amusing. However, so we're watching the football and she eventually decided just to watch the England games. So we're watching an England game. And I said this. I think I was born in the wrong time. Because if I was born as a young man playing football now, and there's lots of women playing football, just think how great it would be to share your life with somebody who had that level of interest in a sport that you did. Which I thought seemed like a reasonable thing to say. But you know when you're with your partner and it just goes like too quiet? You know, it's like a black hole of quietness, and you sort of think, replay what you said. Because that's what I thought I'd said, and what it turns out I'd said was, darling, I'd really like a fight tonight. So, sometimes we just don't think things through. Sometimes it's thoughtless. And we should have the grace to allow that in other people and be forgiving when it happens rather than escalating the conflict. Now, this last one is to suggest that actually the fourth option is that it was us, that we might have overreacted. There may actually have been nothing wrong with what the other person said, and it was us. Does anyone work with somebody who, if you don't put something nice at the start of an email and at the end of an email, they think you've fallen out with them? Anyone else ever had that? Oh, there's a couple, yeah. To me, I thought the point of emails, because I was working when they first came in, and I thought it was to make it quicker than writing a full letter or a full memo, if anyone's here old enough to remember what memos were. But somebody in my office saw me and said, oh no, you need to put, I hope you're well, take care, and do you? But I just want to know if the report's coming. I have a better one than that from this week. So my wife manages a section. And somebody was upset enough to send her an email of complaint because somebody else had sent him an email and the font was too large and therefore they were having a go. No, it wasn't caps. It was just, instead of it being 11 or 12, it was like 14 or something, or 15. Exactly. Who cares? In my opinion, that's him. Because I saw the email and it was the blandest email in the world. It was, I'm just sending you this for your information kind of email. She's having a go at me again. She's really not, mate. So sometimes we have to be self-aware enough to think, actually, was that me that escalated that conflict? How are we doing? Okay. Right. Some tips, hints and tips for dealing with the emotional side then. Right, this, if you're interested in this actual research, it's in a Guardian article from a few years ago. I'm a bit unconvinced on the precision of 31%. I would think surely it depends on factors for each individual, but I'm guessing they had to come up with a number, and so that's an average or something. However, If you remember, if you go back to the amygdala hijack, I'm all right with the principle. As soon as we are in a stress situation where we view conflicts as stressful or confrontation stressful, our brain shuts down some of the things that it would help us to have a proper, productive conversation. So take or leave the 31%, but it feels about right-ish. Right, a few steps. I'm sure there's people here who have tried mindfulness or have looked into mindfulness. Step one is about the self-awareness and the stimulus response. So step one is knowing that your reaction has become emotional rather than cognitive. What I would say with that is, though, obviously not all emotions are bad. If the conversation's a really positive one, but you're both passionate, that's absolutely fine. That's a good thing. But obviously, if the emotion feels negative in terms of tearful, upset, angry, frustrated, whatever, then it's slightly different. So step one is to be aware that it's happening. Step two, I don't think you can see that, it says RAS, that's the reticular activating system. So step two is about changing the story. Step two is about saying, well, conflict is a good thing, because out of conflict we can get understanding. We can move forward, we can solve problems. So these two are both in the brain, as it were, they're kind of intellectual, and these two are to do with the physical side. So step three is focusing on your body, so the physical changes that are happening, so that we can start to control. Not on a course like this, but on a course on presentation skills. There's a woman who came on the course, and she was actually really good at presenting. So I said to her in the first break, why are you here? And the problem she had was she didn't want to do any more presentations because she blushed. Now, I don't mean she blushed. You could feel the heat when she blushed. It was genuinely, she's just like, whatever. And so she was on for tips for how to deal with it. And we sort of talked about the usual ones, but they didn't really work for her. So in the end, what we decided and what she tried was just to own it. And some people in public life have done this. If you remember George Michael when he got arrested, and then his next music video was about policemen in a toilet, which was what happened when he was arrested. And so he just thought, well, fine, I'll take it and use that. And that's what she did. So she started her presentations with, yes, I know I'm blushing, it happens every time, but actually this is going to be a really good presentation. What I'm here to talk to you about is this. And then she was off. As far as I know, she still blushes. So it hasn't stopped her blushing. But what she's decided is, it doesn't matter. Because what matters is the fact I'm good at doing presentations. So it's all about focusing on the body. And then step 4 is about breathing techniques. A couple of things with this. There are lots of different breathing techniques. I met a breath consultant the other day, believe it or not. Anyone a breath consultant in the room? Because my next line was going to be, it's better than proper work, isn't it? But she goes in and teaches people to breathe. And as much as I kind of mocked that, there's an element of it that's true. If we can control the physical response, it starts to control the psychological response as well. Now, my favourite version of this, and there are plenty of versions, is 4-4-4. So effectively, you breathe in for 4, hold for 4, and out for 4. But it has to be controlled breath. It's not a case of 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, because that's still shallow breaths. So it's a case of, and it helps. Now, again, there's two things to this. If you're happy with, you're in a conflict situation and you just, hang on, I need to do my breathing exercises. If you've got the confidence for that, good luck. Well done. My guess is 90% of people don't have the confidence to do that. However, calling a break is always an option. So a toilet break or make someone a cup of tea. Very few people I've met turn down a cup of tea being made for them. How long generally would you suggest is needed if people's emotions are have become quite strong? How long do you think is needed for the average person to calm down in terms of their emotions? There's two answers here. I'll take either the common sense answer or the textbook. So the textbook is in minutes, shall we say. Any suggestions? An hour? Was that 10, 15 minutes in the right ballpark? 20 minutes. According to the textbook, 20 minutes is how long the person with an average metabolism for the stress hormones to rebalance in their body. You'll know where your metabolism is on the scale. Exactly. Who knows? But 20 minutes is not a bad start. Now, that feels long to me. I think 10 minutes sounds sort of more real. But it depends. What's the common sense answer? There are no numbers in it. Sorry? No, we've got angry with each other and we've called a break. So how long should the break go on for? as long as you need, is the common sense answer. So if you come back after 20 minutes and the person you're in conversation with is sat there like this, right, 20 minutes wasn't long enough. But obviously if you've come back after 10 minutes and they seem calmed down and everything, 10 minutes was all right for that person. And hopefully for you if you've gone out and done your breathing and your self-awareness exercises. So call a break. One piece of advice, do not blame the break on them. That will not help the situation. So do not start the break by saying, oh, you look a bit upset, should we take a break? Because you're already blaming everything onto the other person, and it's just going to make the situation worse. So own it yourself. I don't know about you, but I need a break. I need to go to the toilet, get a glass of water, make a cup of tea. Do you want one? Whatever it is, but own it rather than put it on the other person. Right. This is half of a longer presentation. So this half of the presentation is about the emotional side. The bit about conflict management negotiation skills is another session. So we do our own events, as I said, the IAM, so keep an eye out if you want to do the second bit. The second bit focuses on negotiation, but just to not leave you in complete limbo, if you get involved in who gets involved in negotiations here? That's all of you. Every day you're involved in negotiations, whether they're specific, are they contract ones that you get involved in? Yeah. Contract negotiations are easy because everyone knows they're not easy. They're easy to identify as negotiations because everyone sat down and the rules are we're going to negotiate now. But actually, any time there's two people with a slight difference of opinion, there's a negotiation going to happen. I would recommend this book. I have no financial interest in it. I wish I did. It sold something like 10 million copies. Getting to Yes. What's really good about this? It was a Harvard business project into what made good negotiators. And it's quite a few years old now, 20 years old at least, I think. However, the writers, because they could be identified at Harvard Business School, people wrote to them and said, well, that's very well, but when I did. Every edition since, they've effectively added a frequently asked question bit at the end. So they said, oh, we've had 100 questions about this. This is what we suggest you do. So the original one is quite short, which is a good thing I find in business books, because it's easy to lose your wit to live through some of them, if you've ever read anything by Peter Drucker. But so this book has got thicker and thicker, but there's lots of common sense examples in there. Some of them are quite high level ones, about $60 billion mining rights, but others are very, very down to earth, buying a car or a lease with a landlord or something like that. I would thoroughly recommend it. And as I say, you're always involved in negotiations. Now, it doesn't specifically cover selling, because with selling the rules change. But in terms of an average negotiation in an office, really good. Now, this is their definition of a good negotiation. A wise agreement reached amicably and efficiently. If we're negotiating, and I'm the kind of aggressive bullying negotiator, and you just want to give in, is the outcome going to be wise, amicable, and efficient? Which one of those will it be? It'll be efficient, certainly from my point of view. It's unlikely to be wise unless I'm right all the time. I mean, I'm right lots of the time, but nobody's right all the time. And it's certainly not going to be amicable. So, their tools and techniques in their book is about reaching that. Right, there's somebody else who's worth looking at in terms of negotiation skills. Now, this guy, Chris Voss, was the lead negotiator for the FBI. Now, some of his stories are a little bit more dramatic than most of ours because his are genuine life or death. So, when I was negotiating with the Somali pirate about the release of none of us have been involved in that. However, he has some very good points to make. Now, he's got video clips on YouTube if you want to see him. He looks like that. Why I've put him up here is for the people, I suspect most of the people that come to this talk are people who don't do well in conflict because they give in too early. However, if there's anybody in the room who's come because in conflict they become the aggressive, angry, bullying type, this is for you. Because it's all very well winning every negotiation or winning every argument or just bullying someone into submission. But Chris Voss has this really good point that you shouldn't be so sure of what you want going into something that you miss the chance for something better. Because the reticular activating system, the stronger you've put your case together, the more that your reticular activating system will just want to argue about that. And you might miss something from the other side that says, well, we could do this. You think, oh yeah, actually that would be a useful thing to do as well. So make sure of this, that you're never so sure of something that you wouldn't take something better. Right, finish off with the Thomas Kilmann model. Essentially, this was a bit of academic theory, and they looked at two things: how cooperative you want to be in a negotiation, i.e. how much you want to work with somebody, and how assertive. Now, their version of assertive, that's right, their version of assertive was about getting your own way. Now, the modern version of assertive is much more about satisfying your needs and taking account of the other person's needs. When they did this, they used a definition of assertive, which was basically get your own way. And they came up with 5 different strategies. Is avoiding ever a good strategy? Do you want to have another go? You're sort of right. It's yes, but not often.
You could just build and get worse.
It might get worse.
So you said about you need to fight, otherwise it will build up resentment.
It might. However, I'm talking about some very specific situations. No, you're right. And again, you're broadly right as well. In general, avoiding is not a good strategy. If it's the only strategy you use, and then you sort of rationalise it to yourself afterwards, you're probably just avoiding conflict because you hate conflict. However, there are some very small situations where avoiding can be a good strategy. One example is that you've got someone on your team who has got 2 weeks left of work left. If you can get them to write up some decent handover notes, not cause any trouble, and vaguely turn up on time, I'd take that as a win. If they annoy you to the extent that you start performance managing them for 2 weeks, that's only draining your time. They couldn't give a monkeys. If you'd rather sit in a room with them explaining something they know, they'll just sit there and, yeah, carry on. It's up to you. So, you're both right. Avoiding generally not a good strategy. However, there are very small instances where avoiding is not the worst strategy in the world. But don't do it if it's the only one you do. Competitive is obviously about you always get your own way, so win-lose, and accommodating is about lose-win. The book, particularly the book, is really good at explaining how this works, how win-win works. Win-win is harder than it sounds, because win-win and proper collaborative negotiating is if we're both negotiating on something, we try and get the best for both of us. And that's quite difficult. It sounds logical, but sometimes just seeing the other person's point of view can be a challenge, let alone helping them get what they want. So quite often we have a compromise instead. Now, there's one that's missing on there, which is lose-lose. When do you get lose-lose? Okay. If a competitive person is arguing with an accommodating person, will you get lose-lose? No, they'll win. So what do you need for lose-lose to happen? 2 competitive people or 2 accommodating, yeah. Right, 2 competitive is obvious. It's just shouting at each other and escalating, and basically whoever's got the will to carry on shouting eventually wins. When I was in the MOD, we had a trade union convener. For the younger people, I'd explain trade unions at the end. And he thought he was some kind of people's rights. He argued on everything. He started a negotiation, because I was on the management team. He started a negotiation from the viewpoint, management are wrong and up to something. Now, because it was the MOD, at that time, what used to happen was we used to have an army officer in charge because of a thing called transition to war, which basically means if we suddenly went to war, there's an infrastructure with serving military personnel in key positions. He was ours. We had quite a moderate guy left, and the person they've shipped in, his previous posting was operational warfare in the Borneo jungle. So he was training and working with soldiers on how to actually fight. And so he was doing proper soldiering. And he came to Colchester in Essex. We had 150 people, 3 military, the rest of us were civilians. And his view on this union guy was, no one's telling me how to run my unit. And that was it. The rest of us, there were 4 shop stewards, convener, 6 management. We might as well not been there because these 2 just banged heads and it was just a waste of everyone's time. So that's what happens when you get a lose-lose. Why is accommodating lose-lose? No problem solving. We're so keen to let the other person have some of their own way that we don't actually solve the issue that needs solving. So aim for collaborative, aim for win-win.
Sorry.
No, that's all right. Literally on the last slide now. Some ways to think about the win-win is there's two ways to talk about an issue. Again, if you imagine this bit's not here, which group of people does this describe nicely? So they talk at each other, they focus on the past, they talk about who's right, and they blame each other for problems. Which group of people does that sound like to you? Politicians, who said that? Yeah. And particularly MPs. That's what they do. They talk at each other. They focus on the past. So Tories are in now. So Labour will talk about how wonderful it was when Labour were in government. Or if something's better now, the Tories will talk about how bad it was under Labour and how good they've made it. They talk about who's right and they blame each other. So that's our adversarial political system. That is how you should talk with somebody if you want to turn a conflict into a forward-thinking, a positive negotiation that's going to actually solve problems.